Hello everyone, hope all of you are safe and healthy. Friends, all of you are cordially invited for the Sunday's live discussion session, and if you have any specific doubts, kindly place it in team@iasbaba.com. That helps us to prepare in advance. Now, coming to IAS Baba's rapid revision series for prelims 2021, this is day 61 and session 45. And the topics we have are the science and astrophysics. So, here we concentrate mostly on astrophysics. So, these are the hot topics we are going to discuss, that is the Raman scattering, then optical tweezers, then the Chandrasekhar limit, and then the dark matter and the dark energy, the relation between the two, and antimatter and black hole. And here we bust some of the myths regarding the relation of antimatter and black hole, then black holes and theory of relativity, then the India based neutrino observatory, and then UVC technology or the ultraviolet C technology, then quasars and pulsars, and lastly the sonic boom. Now, coming to the first one, the Raman scattering. Friends, why was it in news? Because researchers at IIT Madras have demonstrated that by using Raman thermometry on optic fiber cables, they can achieve monitoring of power transmission cables. So, using optical fibers and by using the concept of Raman thermometry, they are monitoring the power transmission cables. So, how they will do? We will discuss it. Before that, we discuss the Raman effect. So, in Raman effect, when light is scattered off an object, say a molecule, two bands are observed with higher and lower frequency than the original light. So, this is the Raman effect, and by studying the relative intensity of the two bands, it is possible to estimate the temperature of the object. So, not only temperature, the characteristics, physical properties, the lattice, the molecular positions, everything can be analyzed by these rays that are refracted or reflected off the object. So, here we discuss various scattering. So, when we pass a light, three kinds of scattering occur. That is, first one is the Rayleigh scattering, wherein the wavelength of the diffracted or the scattered light is same as the wavelength of the input light. But however, in the Raman scattering, the wavelength will be higher than the input wavelength, or in other words, frequency will be lower. Friends, we know that the wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional, that is C equal F lambda. Yes, and then we have anti-Raman scattering or anti-Stokes Raman scattering. Here the wavelength is lesser than the laser that is input, or in other words, the frequency is more than the input radiation. So, here if it is lesser, it is called the Raman. If it is higher, then it is called the anti-Raman. Yes, friends. And in this figure, we have summarized how the Rayleigh scattering, the Stokes Raman scattering, and anti-Stokes Raman scattering are being emitted. Then come to next, the application of Raman scattering. So, here the Raman scanner is being used, and it can be pointed at the substance to detect what it is. So, in this Raman scanner, you emit a light source from this Raman scanner, and this light will be scattered by the object on which you are emitting. And on the basis of the scattered light, you can detect what kind of object the person is carrying. And here police have begun to use this scanner to find out if people are carrying any banned substance. And then coming to Raman thermometry. So, here the lower frequency component of Raman scattering is strongly dependent on the temperature that material is subjected to. Friends, here lower frequency means higher wavelength. Yes, we have discussed that the frequency and wavelength are inversely proportional, and thus by measuring the intensity of lower frequency scattered light, we can estimate the temperature. So, this is Raman thermometry. Friends, the lower frequency means higher wavelength. So, higher wavelength means the more and more infrared radiation will be emitted. So, this infrared radiation is mainly the heat wave, and this heat wave, it gives the exact information on the temperature. So, this is the trick here. And now coming to this transmission cable. Friends, in this transmission cable, when the electricity is passed, then automatically due to friction of electrons, heat is generated, and this is a common phenomenon called Joule's heating. And then this heat is radiated in the form of infrared rays, and these are emitted out of this wire, and the optical fiber that is lying nearby, it will catch this radiation and it will pass the information to the Raman thermometry or the scanner here, and this scanner, it will detect whether the temperature is increasing or decreasing. Now, if I attach another wire here, and if I draw current from it, and if I rob the current, then at this junction the temperature will be higher, and here the more and more infrared radiation will be passed, and this will be detected by the Raman thermometry. So, this is how the Raman thermometry works. Friends, moreover, in the newspapers we come across this word, that is the Raman spectroscopy market, and the size and share of Raman spectroscopy market will be analyzed day by day. So what is Raman spectroscopy market, friends? It is the market of those set of industries that work on the basis of Raman spectroscopy, or those industries which make use of Raman spectroscopy for their businesses. So those set of companies are listed in a stock and they are called the Raman spectroscopy market. And when the prospects of these companies rise, then the Raman spectroscopy market will be rising with its shares, and if they are down, then the stocks come down. So this is how the Raman spectroscopy market is traced and analyzed. Friends, optical tweezers are in use because a simplified method for calibrating optical tweezers has been found recently, and moreover, optical tweezers have got the Nobel Prize in the year 2018, and that is why optical tweezers become important. Now, what are optical tweezers, friends? Before that, what is a tweezer, friend? Tweezer is a pair of tongs. So here in this figure, we can see the tweezer, and this helps in handling minute particles. So we can see how this pair of tongs will handle those minute particles which we cannot handle with our bare hands. The same way, we handle the minute particles via optics. So that is how the optical tweezer words come from. Now, the optical tweezers are originally called single beam radiant force trap. So here, the beams emitted by this optical tweezer, they trap the minute particles like a pair of tongs. So here we can see how this beam has trapped this particle, and here it will be either force of attraction or equal force of repulsion. So either by repulsion or attraction, this will catch hold of this minute particle just like the pair of tongs. Then they use a highly focused laser beam to hold and move microscopic and submicroscopic objects like atoms, nanoparticles, droplets in a manner similar to tweezer. So just like tweezers, this will help in moving, holding and lifting the minute particles. Then, if the object is held in air or vacuum without additional support, it can be called the optical levitation. So, if I start lifting this minute particle by using these beams of lights above the surface of the earth, then I am levitating the object, or I am making the object to float in the air without any support. So, what is levitation? It is magically lifting an object. That is, levitation is possible if the force of light counters the force of gravity. So, these lasers, if they are having force of attraction much more than force of gravity, and if I start pulling this object comes along with the light and it will be detached from the earth and it will be floating. And then all this occurs because the laser light provides an attractive or repulsive forces. So, because of this attractive or repulsive forces, we can use lasers as the tweezers, and that is why the name optical tweezers. I hope you have understood. And then come to next one, the Chandrasekhar limit. Friends, we all know that astrophysics is one of the least explored subject, and this Chandrasekhar limit, quasars, pulsars, then black holes, then matter, antimatters, these are some of the attempts to learn astrophysics. So that is why these are the basic elements or features of astrophysics, and these need not be in news to become important. So these are the only few concepts that are present in astrophysics, and it is better to learn them. Now, coming to the topic, Chandrasekhar limit is established at a point when the mass at which the pressure from the degeneration of electrons is not able to balance the self attraction of gravitation field. Then the Chandrasekhar limit is the maximum mass of a stable white dwarf star. Then the currently accepted value of Chandrasekhar limit is about 1.4 mass of the sun, or it is 2.765 into 10 to the power 30 kgs. Friends, we do not understand like this, we discuss with an example. That is, consider an atom. So we know that atom has a nucleus at the center, and at the periphery electrons will be revolving. And now these electrons, they will be repulsive in nature. Yes friends, and these electrons are placed at different shells. So p shell, s shell likewise, and these shells will be repulsive in nature because electrons naturally they have the similar charges and they repel one another. And here there are chances of this electron moving out of this atom. But however, the strong force of attraction between the nucleus and the electron will pull this electron against this repulsive force, and thus there is a balance created. And that is why, due to balance between this repulsive force and this attractive force, this atom will be stable. Now, comparing the same with a star. Friends, you know that star has an inner core and which is metallic, and that is why it has a huge gravitational force of attraction, and this gravitation holds almost all the matters that exist in the periphery of the star. Like sun, we have the core of the sun, and it holds all the matters that present in the corona of the sun. But however, in the corona or in the periphery of the star, there occurs nuclear fusion reaction, and here more and more electrons and protons are created. And here, when more and more electrons are created, friends, we know that electrons are repulsive in nature. So, one electron will repel another. So, overall, there are more chances of these electrons scattering and moving out of this star and not holding stuck to this inner core. But however, this is balanced by the gravitational force of attraction by this inner core. And if there is a balance, then the star will be stable. Or in other words, until there is a balance, this star will be stable. But if it starts losing the balance, then these electrons will move out of the star and this star will degenerate. Now, coming to this death of the star. During the death of the star, friends, more and more nuclear fusion occurs and more electrons will be produced. And during the death of the star, there are huge forces of repulsion or there are huge pressures from the degeneration of electrons. So, pressure from degeneration of electrons is nothing but this repulsive force of electrons which are being produced due to nuclear fusion. And this force is higher than a gravitational force of attraction of the inner core. And that is why during the death of the stars, all these degeneration or explosion, implosion of the star occurs. Now, coming to the death of the star. Now, the stars are dying. We compare several stars which are dying. And first we take up a small star. Friends, we know that small star has a small core and the gravitational pull of this core will also be lower. You agree with me? And now, when this gravitational pull is lower, there are more chances of these electrons moving out of the star. And that is why this star explodes and it becomes a red giant and it collapses in the universe. So, small stars, they become red giant after their death and they collapse. And now coming to some bigger stars, so called as white dwarfs. So, here the force of attraction will be more and this force of attraction will balance this force of repulsion. So, now when there is a balance, then the star will not explode or it will neither implode. Implode means shrinking, friends. Now, this will remain stable. So, these stars which are medium in size, they become white dwarfs. So, what are those stars or what are the sizes or masses of those stars which become white dwarfs? It is those stars whose masses are nearer or less than 1.4 times the solar masses, or those stars whose mass is 1.4 or less than 1.4 times of the mass of the sun, they will remain stable. And here the electron degeneracy pressure will be almost equivalent to the gravitational force of attraction of the core. So, this is the Chandrasekhar limit. So, here 1.4 times of the sun, if this value is lesser, then it becomes white dwarf. Now, what if the limit is exceeded? Now, we will take up some bigger stars. So, we take up those stars whose mass is somewhere around 1.4 to 3 times of the solar masses. So, in those stars, there will be more of gravitational force. You agree with me? And these gravitational forces, they offset or they overpower these repulsive forces. So, in other words, this star after death, it starts sinking inwards and this shrinks, and as it shrinks, the density increases because more number of particles are held in less amount of space. So, huge amount of particles, huge amount of mass within small amount of space. At this point of time, the electrons and the protons, they start merging together to form neutrons, and a mass of neutrons will be formed rather than mass of the proton or the positive core and the electronic outer periphery. So, rather than that, there will be a single neutral neutron masses, and these are dark matters. So, here we will be having a matter which is very dark and which is neutral in charges, and it is having high density and high force of gravitation. So, now there is no repulsive force here, but only attractive force is there, and this will be having high gravitational force. Now, coming to some bigger stars which is much more than the mass of the sun, or which is more than 3 times the solar masses. So, now here they will not even become these neutron stars. So, because the gravitational pull will shrink these neutron stars more and more. So, here now I consider a neutron star in the offing. So, now a neutron star is born, but the star is so huge that even this neutron star is shrinking in size. So, it is becoming smaller and smaller because of huge gravitational force. And there will be one point of time where the gravitational force is so huge that this star will be shrinking towards a minuteness, and at one point of time this star will disappear, and only that increased force of gravitation and excess of density will remain in the universe. So, this is called black hole. So, now what is a black hole, friends? It is a near vacuum in the universe which has a extremely high gravitational force, and it will pull everything that comes within their vicinities. So, a light, an object, a matter, whatever that comes in, that will be pulled into it within the gravitational force. But to see there, we cannot see anything. So, just like the ghost, it acts like a pulling force. So, that is why it is called black holes. Actually, what is there inside a black hole? What happens if you go inside? No one knows. So, I hope you have understood the Chandrasekhar limit. And now coming to the next topic, that is the dark matter and dark energy. Now, dark matter is called dark because it does not appear to interact with the electromagnetic field. Friends, dark matter doesn't have any charge and it doesn't interact with the electromagnetic field, which means it does not absorb, reflect or emit electromagnetic radiation and is therefore difficult to detect them. So, we cannot detect the dark matter, but there are dark matters in the universe. We have several evidence to prove that. That is, primary evidence for it is the fact that many galaxies would fly apart or that they would not have formed or would not have moved as they do if they did not contain a large amount of unseen matter. Friends, we know that black hole is an attractive force, gravitation is an attractive force. These stars, they pull the planets, they pull the satellites, but still universe is expanding, it is not contracting. So, why this universe should expand? This shows that there is some force which is repulsive in nature. There is some matter which is creating an expansive force. So, all these are associated with dark matter and dark energy. And this dark matter and dark energy, what are they? We do not know. And scientists are finding what are this dark matter and dark energy. Then, other lines of evidence include observations in the gravitational lensing. Now, what is gravitational lensing, friends? We all know that when we pass a light through this dark matter, this light, it bends towards this dark matter. Or in other words, this dark matter, it will absorb the light. So, as it cannot absorb completely, it at least bends this light. So, this also proves that there are dark matters. Then, dark matter is hypothetical form of matter thought to account for approximately 85% of matter in the universe. Yes, friends, what we see the white matter, that is the stars, planets, satellites, etc., they are only 15%, and this dark matter itself forms the 85%. Now, whether this dark matter is associated with the black hole or whether this dark matter is what is present within the black hole or whether the neutron stars are themselves the dark matters, that we don't know. So, this we will get to know only if we explore the black holes completely. Then come to next, dark energy. Friends, in physical cosmology and astronomy, dark energy is an unknown form of energy that affects the universe on the largest scale. Yes, dark energy affects the universe. We know that in spite of so many forces of attraction, the universe is expanding, or there is an inherent repulsive force that is acting within the universe. And this is an evidence of dark energy or the dark matter which is emitting this energy. Then, the first observational evidence for this existence came from the fact that universe does not expand at a constant rate, rather the expansion of universe is accelerated. So, if there are no dark energy, if there are only dark matter, then the universe would have expanded steadily. Friends, we know that in the Newton's law of motion, if an object is moving with a constant speed, then no force or no energy is acting on it. So, if there are no dark energy, then universe would have expanded steadily. But however, the expansion of universe is accelerating. It is not expanding steadily. So, that shows that there is some energy which is pushing towards the expansion of universe, and that is called dark energy. Yes, friends, I hope you have understood. I like to say once again that we know that Newton's law of force, that is force is equal to mass into acceleration. So, here there has to be some acceleration, and if there is some acceleration, there has to be some force. So, just presence of dark matter will not suffice. There should be the presence of both dark matter and dark energy for the universe to expand in the accelerating phase. So, this accelerating phase is the point here. Then, the best current measurement indicates that dark energy contributes 68% of total energy in the present day observable universe. Yes, friends, this dark energy is itself contributing to 68% of total energy. So, the solar energy or energy produced by electromagnetic radiation, cosmic waves, so all these form only 32%. So, this is all about the dark matter and dark energy. I hope you got it. Then come to the next one, that is antimatter and the black hole. Friends, first we discuss what is antimatter. Antimatter is defined as a matter that is composed of antiparticles of the ordinary matter. So, what are these antiparticles, friends? For example, a positron is the antiparticle of electron, and the antiproton is the antiparticle of the proton. So now, why proton is not an antiparticle of electron, friends? Because proton is having much more mass than an electron. But this positron is having the similar mass to that of electron, but also it carries the equal opposite charge. So that is why based on the mass plus charge, the antiparticle is determined. Then once again coming to proton. So this antiproton is having similar mass of a proton, but it is having an equal negative charge of a proton. So now, when a positron and antiproton, when they combine, we can form a antihydrogen atom. So this antihydrogen atom is the antimatter. So friends, there are predictions that this antimatter can be the matter inside the black hole, but still there are debates going on. We will see how the debates are going on. Then, minuscule numbers of antiparticles are generated daily at cosmic ray collisions and some types of radioactive decay. Yes friends, very minute amount of antiparticles can be produced. So these are a rarest of rarity. Then, but only a tiny fraction of these have successfully been bound together in the experiments to form antiatoms. So even in the experimental laboratory, only few antiparticles could have been made. And then, no macroscopic amount of antimatter has ever been assembled due to the extreme cost and difficulty in production and handling of these antiparticles. Yes friends, microscopically 1 or 2 experiments have been done, but macroscopically there is no antimatter that is created as of now. And the cost is huge friends. To create 1 atom of antihydrogen, it requires some 62 million US dollars. So when that is the cost, we cannot do it virtually. Then the collision between any particle and its antiparticle partner leads to their mutual annihilation. So when a particle collides with antiparticle, it leads to mutual cancellation, and that cancellation gives rise to various proportion of intense photons, neutrinos, and sometimes less massive particle-antiparticle pairs. So if we collide an antiparticle and a particle, either we get the photons or the light emissions in the form of gamma rays, or we get neutrinos, or we get a lighter pace of particle and antiparticle. Or in other words, if we collide to anti-helium, then either we will get the gamma rays, or we will get neutrinos, or we will get 2 hydrogen antiparticles or 2 antihydrogens. So these are the some of the characteristics of antimatter. Here we can see the antihydrogen. Then come to next, antimatter and the black hole. Friends, the key facts are that there is no way to distinguish an antiparticle black hole from a regular matter black hole. And then, in fact, there is no difference between an antimatter black hole and a regular matter black hole. And all information and structure that falls into a black hole becomes trapped from the rest of the universe and perhaps even destroyed, except for its effect on the total mass angular momentum of the black hole. Yes friends, now in the previous slide we have discussed that there are debates going on that if antimatter and matter, if they collide, it forms a black hole. No, there are antimatter black holes and matter black holes separately. Even antimatters, they can form black holes just like matters. That is, if antimatters, if they shrink and shrink, they will form antimatter black hole. And now there will be no distinction between this antimatter black hole and matter black hole, because once these particles are shrinking, then their charges will be nullified. So they will lose their charges. So we cannot identify whether it is a positron or an electron, whether it is an antiproton or a proton. Only the mass and the gravitational pull and the angular momentum will remain. So angular momentum means the spin. So by checking only the spin mass, we cannot find out whether it is a particle or an antiparticle. And now, when a particle black hole and an antiparticle black hole, when they collide, they do not get to know that they are antiparticle black hole and particle black hole. They just collide, and the collision of antiparticle black hole and particle black hole can give rise to a larger black hole rather than the nullification of this black hole. So if a particle black hole and antiparticle black hole, if they collide, then there will be no nullification. They will not nullify the black hole. Rather, just like any 2 particle black holes, when they collide, they form the bigger black holes. The same way, the particle black holes and antiparticle black holes, they form a bigger black hole. So now there is no point of nullifying a black hole, and there is no choice for nullifying this black hole. So this is where the debate stands right now. So I hope you are clear with the antimatter and the relation with the black hole. And then come to the next one, black holes and the theory of relativity. Friends, why was it in news? Because the latest 2020 Nobel Prize was awarded for finding a black hole which is exactly in compliance with the theory of relativity. So now what did they prove there? So why the theory of relativity is related to these black holes? We will discuss now. Friends, in one of the previous slides, we have discussed that this F equal ma or the Newtonian law of force will not be applicable to the universe. Not only the universe, friends, this F equal ma, force equal mass into acceleration, this cannot explain the magnetic force, it cannot explain the gravitational force, it cannot explain the weak nuclear forces. So this F equal ma is only assuming that universe works in vacuum. But however, universe doesn't work in vacuum as per Albert Einstein. He says that mass can be converted into energy and energy can be converted into mass. But however, in Newton, force or energy can only be transmitted from one body to other body. This cannot convert a body to an energy as a whole. And now, why this assumption is that the Newton assumed universe is a vacuum, but as per Einstein, this universe is not a vacuum, it is a space-time variable, or in other words, it is a space-time graph. So we have discussed during the gravitational wave how the space-time graph works. So this space-time graph works like a tarpaulin. That is, here we can see how the space-time graph works. This is space, this can be time. And now the black hole is a dip within this tarpaulin. So whatever object, if you put on this space-time trampoline, it revolves and ultimately it merges or it enters the black hole and it settles there. There is no chances of this coming out. So this is how the black hole works, and this is how the universe will set up the black hole's environment. And this is not a 2-dimension, it is a 3-dimensional, friends. Something like this, we can see how this space-time graph will work around the black hole. Not only around black holes, all around universe, this space-time graph will work. So that is why we have discussed when a gravitational wave travels, it travels in a space-time graph. So both the space and the time will be varied all over the wave travels. And now coming to more about the theory of relativity. So now friends, as per this space-time trampoline theorem, there is a dip and nothing can escape out of this black hole. So that is what the Albert Einstein said. He said that unlike the Newtonian's law of force, where the force can either be transferred from one body to other body, we cannot kill the force. But however, in this space-time graph, there are some places like black holes, wherein this force, energy, matter, light, everything can be killed and it can be curved and it can be stored within the black hole. And the overall theorem is that as per the Einstein's black hole theory, nothing can come out of a black hole and everything that goes inside will be stuck inside. But however, some of the scientists like Stephen Hawking, they debated this and they said that no, there will be some particles that can come out of the black hole. There will be some matters that can escape out of the black hole. But however, these 3 Nobel laureates, they proved that actually the black holes are as per the Einstein's theory. That is, nothing can come out of this black hole once if they enter. And they gave some 10 million times of evidences to prove that nothing can come out of this black hole. And that is why they are given the Nobel Prize. And this Andrea Ghez and others, they identified a black hole within this Milky Way galaxy. And they proved that nothing can come out of this Milky Way galaxy. So that is why they are given the Nobel Prize. And this is where the debate stands now. That is, black holes are having infinite gravitational force and unlike Newtonian force, they kill the forces and nothing can come out of them. I hope you have understood. Then come to next. The India-based Neutrino Observatory. Friends, why was it in news? Because the INO Observatory was stalled due to lack of funds. Yes, we know that 3 to 4 years back, India contemplated a Neutrino Observatory, but this is not picking up the pace because of lack of funds and due to COVID-19 and other obstacles. Now, come to more about the INO Observatory. The INO is located in the West Bodhi Hills region in the Theni district of Tamil Nadu. So, it is in Tamil Nadu's Theni district, and then INO involves the construction of an underground laboratory. So, this is underground, and then it involves the inter-institutional culture for high energy physics and an iron calorimeter detector. So, it has 2 setups, that is the Inter-Institutional Center for Higher Energy Physics, that center which looks into interdisciplinary physics like the classical physics, astrophysics, particle physics and others. And then it has a iron calorimeter detector to detect the neutrinos. Then iron calorimeter helps to study the properties of neutrino, specifically the mass hierarchy in various types of neutrino. So, there are various types of neutrino and which is having the highest, which is having the lowest, all this will be detected by this iron calorimeter detector. Then it will be the largest in the world, weighing over 50,000 tons. Then Department of Science and Technology and the Department of Atomic Energy jointly support the project. So, these are the 2 institutions which are supporting the project, that is Department of S&T and DAE. So, here we have a blueprint of this observatory, but this is primitive in nature, we cannot understand anything here. Now, coming to more about the neutrinos. So, there are several types of neutrinos, friends. Before that, what is a neutrino? Neutrinos are electrically neutral, elementary and weakly interacting subatomic particles. So, they do not have a charge, or the net charge of them is 0. Then elementary particles, yes, they are elementary particles just like the electron, proton, neutron, etc. Then they are weakly interacting subatomic particles. So, they do not interact with anyone. So, they do not interact with the electromagnetic radiations. Then they belong to the lepton family. Yes, we know that in the particle physics we have bosons and fermions, and then in the fermions we have quarks and leptons. So, this belongs to lepton family. We have discussed all the 16 particles of particle physics in the very first class. Do not forget them. Then neutrinos are the second most widely occurring particles in the universe and only second to photons. Friends, we know that light is made up of discrete particles called photons, and neutrons is very next to the abundance compared to the photons. Or in other words, there are neutrinos which are roaming and roaming all around the universe and all around us. So, every time millions of neutrinos they enter our body and they come out of our body. Then neutrinos are similar to electron by mass, but they do not carry electric charge. So, by mass they are same to electrons, but they do not carry any charge. But however, electrons carry 1 coulomb of negative charge. Then they are not affected by electromagnetic charges, but however, electrons are affected by the electromagnetic charges. So, this is the difference. Then there are 3 types of neutrinos. They are electron neutrino, that is very much similar to an electron by mass. Then muon neutrino, which is very similar to the muon by mass. Muon is other kind of fermion, friends. Then tau neutrino, which is also similar to the tau, once again another kind of fermion. Then in 2015, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Takaaki Kajita and Arthur B. McDonald for discovering the neutrino oscillations, demonstrating that neutrinos have mass. So, neutrinos have very minuscule mass, friends. Earlier it was known that neutrinos will not carry any mass, but however, these Nobel laureates they gave a great insights to the neutrinos, and they said that yes, neutrinos they do carry mass, and the mass is very much equivalent to the mass of an electron. And then neutrinos are the least harmful of all elementary particles, as they almost never react with the solid bodies. Yes, friends, we have discussed that. Then neutrino is about 17 billion times lighter than the neutron. The two are incomparable. So, do not confuse with neutron and a neutrino. The mass of a neutron is 17 billion times more than a neutrino. So, this is all about the neutrino and the neutrino observatory. Then come to next, the UVC technology. Friends, before that we discuss what is a UV radiation. UV radiation is the portion of electromagnetic spectrum between X-rays and the visible light. That is, in the spectrum between this X-rays and the visible light, the UV rays fall, we know that. Then sunlight, which produces 3 main types of UV rays, that is the UVA, UVB and the UVC. So, this is how we zero in on UVC technology. So, UVA rays have the longest wavelengths and followed by UVB and the UVC, or in other words, UVB is having the intermediate wavelength and then UVC is having the shortest wavelength among the 3. And then while UVA and UVB are transmitted through the atmosphere, the UVC and some of the UVB rays are absorbed by the Earth's ozone layer. So, in other words, UVA is completely transmitted into the atmosphere. UVB is selectively transmitted, that is, some frequency of UVB is transmitted and some frequency of UVB is absorbed by the ozone layer. But however, almost all the frequencies of UVC is absorbed by the ozone layer and nothing of UVC will be transmitted into the atmosphere. Then most of the UV rays you can come in contact with are UVA and to the small extent UVB. So, you cannot experience UVC in the real world. But however, with the technological usage, we can stimulate the emission of UVC within the earth and we can experience UVC radiations. And moreover, friends, UVC radiation has multiple advantages. So, here we can see that UVC technology is used to mitigate COVID spread in the parliament. So, there is a machine which emits UVC technology and it can curb the spread of COVID-19 in the parliament. So, this will be fixed on the top of the parliamentary hall and it will continuously emit the light and it will kill the coronavirus, just like how this Mortein and other coils they will kill the mosquitoes. Then come to more about this UVC technology. Friends, the UV radiations are normally used to kill microorganisms, particularly the UVC, also known as the ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, is a disinfectant. So, UVC is a disinfectant basically. Then UVGI or the ultraviolet germicidal irradiation is used in a variety of applications such as food, air and water disinfection. Yes, in the aqua guards, then in the food refrigerators and the food preservatives, in all these UVGI is used. Then UVC may also pose potential health and safety risks depending on the wavelength, dose and duration of radiation to exposure. So, just like they protect, but they are also harmful that they can cause some cancerous and other tumors if the normal cells are being exposed too much to this UVC radiation. Then come to more about this UVC air duct disinfection system, or that system which is going to be installed in the Parliamentary House to kill coronavirus. This is being developed by the CSIR and the CSIO, that is the Central for Scientific and Industrial Research and the Central Scientific Instrumental Organization. Then the virus will get deactivated in any aerosol particle by calibrated levels of UV light. So, a calibrated levels of UV light which is harmful for virus, but which is not harmful for the humans, are being emitted, and this will kill the virus. At the same time, it will not cause any harm to the human beings, the MPs present there. Then it can be used in auditoriums, malls, educational institutions, AC buses and in railways. So, not only in the parliament, it can be installed in all places wherein the crowd is huge. So, now experimentally it will be tested in the parliament, and if it is safe, it will be installed in all these areas. So, this is all about the UVC technology. Then come to next, quasars and pulsars. Now, first one, quasars. Friends, quasars are the cores of galaxies where a supermassive black hole is messily feeding. So, this is the core of a galaxy where the supermassive black hole is feeding on whatever that comes into its vicinity. So, it is absorbing whatever light matter that comes nearby that. Then orbiting gas and dust whip around the black hole with such ferocity that they give off light in all wavelengths. So, that is the black hole, it absorbs all the dust particles, and we know that friends, in the Einstein's theory we studied that these dust particles, they revolve and revolve before entering this black hole, and now in this revolution the speed will be increased, and due to friction the light will be emitted, and the light will be of all wavelengths. Then the magnetic field of powerful black hole traps the particles from this spinning disk and expels them along its poles. So, friends, the light will not be emitted in all the direction, rather there will be a magnetic field for this black hole, and that is why it absorbs all the particles from all the surrounding environment, but at the same time it will emit only in these vents, that is only at the poles this light will be emitted, or in other words this will be something like this. So, all the matter will be absorbed by the surrounding environment and emission takes place in these environments. Then come to more facts. We see these polar fountains as gigantic jets in radio waves and X-rays. So, even though the lights of all frequencies are being emitted, but only the X-rays and radio waves are let out of this black hole in the form of jet-like fountains. Then even across the long distances, the core of these galaxies shine like stars. So, this light will be so intense that even at longer distances we can get to know that some black hole is absorbing the dust particles, and due to this the light is being emitted, and that is being emitted only through the poles. Then that is why they were first given the description of quasi-stellar radio sources, or the quasars. So, quasar is an abbreviation for quasi-stellar radio sources. So, in the past times we used to see these quasars only as the stars which emit light continuously. So, the scientists gave the name quasars, or the quasi-stars, or the quasi-stellar radio sources, or the sources of radio waves. So, this is all about the quasars. Come to next, the pulsars. Friends, pulsar or the pulsating radio sources is a highly magnetized rotating compact star that emits beams of electromagnetic radiation out of its magnetic poles. Yes friends, we get to know that this is very much similar to a quasar. But what is the difference? Quasar occurs only in the supermassive black holes, and pulsars occur in the stars, or might be the neutron stars. That is, they usually occur in the neutron stars, but they also occur in the white dwarfs sometimes. Then this radiation can be observed only when a beam of emission is pointing towards Earth and is responsible for the pulsed appearance of emission. So friends, we know that these stars, unlike the black holes, they will be rotating around the galaxy, and we see this only when the Earth comes in direct contact with this light radiation, and when we miss the contact, the light will be missed out and we cannot see the radiation. And we know that these stars, they rotate or revolve periodically, and as they rotate periodically, even the light emission will be periodically absorbed by the Earth. That is why it is called the pulsating radiations. So, we experience these radiations in the form of periodical pulses. and then this produces a very precise interval between the pulses that ranges from milliseconds to seconds for an individual pulsar. So every individual pulsar, it appears to be sending pulses of radiations within milliseconds or in some seconds. So that is why the pulsars are named. So the only difference is that these supermassive black holes, they do not move, but these neutron stars, they will move. Due to this motion, we will get pulsating radiations, not a continuous radiation. I hope you got the difference between quasars and pulsars. Then come to next, sonic boom. Friends, Russia deployed Avangard, a hypersonic missile system. So this supersonic, hypersonic, lower hypersonic, higher hypersonic, what are these? And what is all about sonic boom? We will discuss here. That is the first one, supersonic speed. Supersonic speed is the rate of travel which exceeds the speed of sound, also referred to as Mach 1 speed. So that which nearly exceeds is called the Mach 1 speed. And then, since the speed of the sound depends on the temperature and composition of air, supersonic speed also varies with the changing altitudes. So from height to height, from environment to environment, this supersonic speed will be differing. Then Concorde is the only passenger aircraft to travel at such speeds. So there are several fighter crafts, but only passenger craft which travels in the supersonic speed is the Concorde. So we will remember this fact. Then the term sonic boom is associated with these speeds. So when every object travels in the speed of the sound, it gives a sonic boom. So how sonic boom occurs? It is produced as a result of movement of air molecules under a tremendous force. So here, as the jet moves in the speed of the sound, the air molecules will be moving backwards with the same speed, and this motion and this friction, it causes a huge frictionic sound called the sonic boom. Then come to next, the hypersonic speed. So Avangard is a hypersonic missile, not a supersonic missile. The hypersonic speeds correspond to very high supersonic speeds. That is, they are basically Mach 5 speeds and are 5 times the speed of the sound. Not just 1 time the speed of the sound, it is 5 times. So hypersonic aircrafts are much more faster than the supersonic aircrafts. Then the speed of hypersonic aircraft is around 300 miles per hour. Again, this varies as per the altitude and environment. Then these speeds are of 3 kinds, that is the low hypersonic, higher hypersonic and hypersonic. So it might be around the 3200, 3500 miles per hour likewise. Then X-15 of US Air Force operated by NASA was the only manned aircraft to fly at low hypersonic speed, that is at Mach 6. So this is the only manned aircraft which has traveled in the hypersonic speed, and no others has traveled in that speed till now. So this is all about the hypersonic, supersonic and the sonic boom. Then come to the last part. Friends, what makes a person different from other? What makes a civilization different from other? What makes a nation different from other? What makes a supra-nation different from other? It is only the mental strength, friends. Not your financial strength, neither your physical strength, nor your social strength. So if you are strong with your brain, the brain can take you to somewhere else. It can take you to the different world. And it is that strength which provides you the strength and capability to take the utmost risk. And even if the world is against you, the only strength which prompts you to move forward is the strength of your brain. So develop that strength. It will be of great advantages to you, and it will give you great resilience in terms of difficulties. So develop such strength. All the very best. Good luck, friends.